After a dramatic off-season, the 2024 Supercars Championship is about to get underway. That means it's time for another big year of round previews, reviews, and plenty of Supercars news videos here on the channel. And it all kicks off today with my round preview for the Thrifty Bathurst 500. The battleground to get this season started is an unusual one. The famous Mount Panorama circuit will kick things off with a sprint event rather than the enduro we're so used to and will still have come our way in October. I'll explain why we ended up here for any new fans later in the video, but it is going to be a rare treat to see Supercars sprint racing around the mountain, which is technically a street circuit, although of course we know it as a very famous and well-established racetrack. The lap is 6.2 kilometers in length, or 3.8 miles in an anti-clockwise direction, featuring 23 grueling turns, and the risk rating, if you're not familiar, is absolutely extreme. It's through the roof here at the mountain, and I'm sure sprint racing is only going to add to that level of intensity. The lap begins with a short run into turn 1, Hell Corner. After that you go up Mountain Straight, a big rise in the road here before you drop back down and then begin the climb through turn 2. After that you go through the cutting where the steepness really starts to build. You go up under the tree, often with a big slide, and then across the top of the mountain, past the metal grates, through McPhillamy Park, and then you've got nothing but skyline before you drop down through the S's, through the Dipper, which is a bit like Australia's corkscrew from Laguna Seca, and then you wind yourself down at Forest Elbow. You have another flat out run down the back straight, Conrod Straight, before you fly it through the chase, a big braking marker here, before you stop the car, straighten things up, and make your way down to Murray's Corner, and that completes a lap. In terms of spots to watch, anyone that's seen racing around Bathurst knows that this whole place is just a hotbed for drama, but for this weekend I wanted to focus in on a few of the corners that I think might be extra interesting, given that the cars and the drivers are going to be racing in a sprint format, which is something we so rarely see around Mount Panorama. Starting with turn 1 then, it's my first spot to watch, and the reason why is that this is actually usually a pretty tame corner, even at the start of the great race. The drivers are normally super cautious, trying to look after their cars, knowing they still have 1,000 kilometers yet to run. This weekend, however, the races are a quarter of the length of the Bathurst 1000, obviously paying less points and less prestige, and overtaking is pretty hard around Bathurst as well, especially in a shorter race. So I do suspect we might see a lot more aggression on the race start this weekend, and maybe even some chaos in the mid-pack. Similar kind of logic extends to my second spot to watch, which is Forest Elbow. This is an overtaking location, but this weekend I think we might see some of those more desperate dive bombs that drivers aren't always willing to risk during the big Bathurst 1000. And then my final spot to watch is, of course, the chase, one of the most thrilling sections of racetrack anywhere in Australia, if not the world, and I'm curious to see how the updated Gen 3 cars behave through here, given they've had some aero tweaks over the off season, and of course they'll be running the hard tyre this weekend, which they weren't during the Bathurst 1000, and we'll get stuck into those details very shortly. So when can you see the drivers hit the track around this amazing circuit? Well, the action gets underway on Friday with 2 practice sessions, and there could be a curveball here because at the time of recording it is expected to have showers around the Mount Panorama circuit throughout the day, and that's really important because coming to Saturday we get straight into the competitive stuff, starting with a qualifying at 10:20 AM Australian Eastern Daylight Time. This is all in. The top 10 shootout, which is always a spectacle, at 1:05 PM, and then the first race of the championship, 40 laps around Mount Panorama at 4:10 PM local time. Then we do that format all over again on Sunday with qualifying top 10 shootout and another race of the same length, just with some slightly adjusted times there. The weather is expected to be better on Saturday and Sunday with partly cloudy conditions, and it'll be really interesting to see if we do get a wet Friday, how well the teams then adapt to those drier conditions. As I said at the top, there has been so much going on in Supercars since the checkered flag dropped at the end of last season in Adelaide, so let's get caught up on some of the key headlines you need to know, starting with a big one, especially if you're a new fan tuning in for the first time this year with Supercars. This weekend is not the big Bathurst 1000 that you may be familiar with. That's taking place in October, the usual enduro that is famous around the world. This weekend is a sprint event, still around that same famous circuit, but it's an emergency measure to get this season started after Newcastle was penciled in to get things started as it did last year, but that street circuit dropped off the calendar quite last minute, and here we are, sprint racing around Bathurst. I do hope that sprint events at Bathurst don't become the norm. It was done during COVID once again as an emergency measure, but for me, I like it being preserved purely for the big 1000 race. The second big headline is that the 2023 championship rivals are gone. They are not on the grid this weekend, one of them potentially or almost certainly longer term, and the other one hopefully only for the short term. Starting with that long term departure, and that's Shane van Gisbergen, who it was long speculated he would move his career on to racing in the NASCAR categories in America. He has made that switch and he won't be competing in the 2024 Supercars Championship. The surprising one though was Brody Kostecki, the 2023 champion who won with Erebus. It was announced only weeks ago he would not be racing for Erebus at this weekend's season opener, and all signs suggesting that he won't be on the grid at any point this year. Certainly for the foreseeable future, he's not going to be part of the championship picture, and fingers crossed we do see him back in a supercar very, very soon. And then in the background, if you're into your sort of business side of supercars, there have been big changes during the off season in the management, both in technical, TV, lots of new people in leadership roles in the background. It'll be interesting to see if we start to see some things change throughout this season and hopefully gain some positive momentum as we build towards the 2025 championship. There has been plenty of change to the cars as well, so this is a good time to bring back GEN3 Watch. If once again you're just tuning in for the first time, Supercars introduced brand new cars last year, the GEN3 machines, and to say their introduction was rocky is an understatement. They had plenty of potential in my opinion, but they were rushed to the racetrack and it certainly showed throughout the year. So let's go through what's changed during the off season and hopefully sets us up for a great 2024. Starting with parity. There's two models of cars that race in supercars at the moment, the Ford Mustang and the Chevrolet Camaro. And those cars, despite being different body shapes and having different engines, they are meant to be balanced so they perform equally, and that is a dark art that doesn't always go down that well, and in 2023 the magic was missing, and there were loads of issues throughout the year trying to get those two cars to perform equally. There has been some new equipment introduced during the off season. The cars have gone to America in a wind tunnel to do some improved aero testing, and the engine side of things is still ongoing, but they do have some new tools at their disposal to hopefully bring those cars in equal line, and hopefully that means we will see close on-track battles and hopefully less politics off the track this year as well. Part of the parity process was also just improving the car behavior as well. The cars last year didn't always deliver what the drivers wanted, and while it's always a fine balance between what the championship wants for the fans and what the drivers want as race car drivers, often endless amounts of downforce, they have hopefully refined the balance a little bit, and it sounds like the cars will be a little bit pointier, a little bit racier, and fingers crossed once again that gives us a good show. And then there's loads of other small durability improvements and lots of refinements, small things throughout the cars that we probably won't notice too much as fans, but there are heaps of improvements happening under the hood. And then finally, what are some of the storylines to focus in on this weekend specifically? Round one, the Thrifty Bathurst 500. Well, I've got a few here for you. The first is the trial of the hard tyre. The hard tyre itself is not new, however, it has not been run around Mount Panorama on the GEN3 machines. At the Bathurst 1000 last year, they ran the soft tyre, and in my opinion, it was a huge mistake. So I'm really pleased to see that this weekend, with the sprint round coming in last minute to get things going, they are going to try the hard tyre, and I am a firm believer it will be the better choice of the two. So I'm really excited to see how the GEN3 cars behave on that rubber. The next thing to note is that full course yellows will be introduced to the championship this year, indeed starting this weekend at Bathurst. Virtual safety car is what some people may know it as in Formula 1, and that's coming to supercars now for the first time. I covered this in my previous news video. I actually cut a bit out explaining that this isn't replacing a physical safety car. It's just an extra option if it's a minor incident that might be able to get cleaned up safely and quickly. It'll be interesting to see though who adapts to the quirks of a virtual safety car, because while in theory it should be equal for everybody, there's certainly plenty of ways to take advantage of it. The new team and driver pairings are really exciting up and down the grid, and that's my big third storyline to watch. There is so much change throughout the paddock. New engineers at new teams, drivers swapping left, right and center. It's going to be so interesting to see how all the new matchups go. And that is even more important because with Shane van Gisbergen and Brody Kostecki out of the picture, this championship could be wide open. Immediately after saying it will be hard to predict, let's make some predictions. This is something I like to do for every round preview, and I check back in my round reviews a few days after each event to see if anything landed on the money. And the answer is pretty much always no. My predictions are horrendous, but it's a bit of fun. Don't take it too seriously, and let's get stuck into what I'm thinking. Starting with the results, I am predicting that Ford and Chev will get a win each. Fingers crossed that gets both sides of the fan base nice and happy, and we can leave Bathurst feeling like parity is at least in the ballpark. That would be a good strong start to the season after the chaos we saw in the parity realm in 2023. My second prediction is that there will be a controversial clash. Now this could be a number of things. It could be drivers that have a habit of finding each other, like Cameron Waters and Chaz Mostert for example, leaders coming together while competing for the win, or just a really egregious accident that, you know, really upsets a driver, feels like they were done dirty. I'm thinking, you know, a desperate move over the top of the hill or something like that. And then my final prediction is that the hard tire trial this weekend will be a success, and they will actually replace the soft tire at the Bathurst 1000 in October this year, running the harder compound. This is a hill I've been dying on since October, and I really do think the hard tire is the better choice for the mountain with Gen 3. Long-term followers of this channel know that I like to get your thoughts as well in my videos, and I've got some predictions from you guys ahead of the racing this weekend. Starting off with Bryn here, who is predicting that Dick Johnson Racing will come out swinging. I think this would be a really uplifting start to the season for a lot of Ford fans. Dick Johnson Racing, the shell cars are the way you spot them if you're new to the championship, have had a rough ride in 2023. I think it was just one victory in Townsville, wasn't it? And otherwise very ordinary performances throughout the championship. That team's had lots of issues. They had been responsible for trying to get that Mustang up to speed. They sort of lead the charge, and then the aero and engine specs that they sort of land on then flow on to the rest of the team. So they were pretty distracted in 2023, and coming into this year, hopefully that those parity issues will be less of a factor for them. And also they've got the return of Ryan Story, who was such a key figure in that team during their championship years. So we'll see how they go. And yeah, even as someone that tends to support the Chevs, I would really like to see DJR get back up there. The second prediction from CDN here says Mostert will start winning now the minor changes have kicked in. I assume he means to the cars there. And yeah, Mostert was an interesting case study in 2023. He didn't have too many sort of standout performances, and obviously there was that parity stuff going on in the background. But needless to say, he actually finished 4th in the Drivers' Championship, which just seemed like an absolute magic trick given that there's no real headline performances I can cast my memory back to. So indeed, if the car is stronger this year, the Mustang, no doubt I'm sure we'll see him up towards the front a lot more often. And then finally, Chris Croft here saying that Brock Feeney, and I assume this will be Will Brown, will have a good weekend. They're the two Red Bull drivers. I'm really curious to see how Red Bull go now that Shane van Gisbergen has left the team after being such a pivotal part of it for so many years. But of course, Will Brown is an exciting talent, and Brock Feeney has certainly been cementing himself in that team as well. Cameron Waters to be quick like he is most times at Bathurst. This would be such an ironic result if he manages to get a win this weekend. Given that he's come so close to winning the Bathurst 1000, it would just be painful, I think, if he were to win a sprint event now at the mountain but still not have taken out the big one. Speaking of the pit lane, that will be a talking point this year as Supercars introduces the live pit lane concept. This is an interesting one. I don't think it's going to change the world, but I do think it's a good idea. And this basically means that instead of the pit lane order being locked in for the whole year and decided by the previous year's team's championship standings, it will actually change from event to event based on the current order of the team's championship. So this weekend it will roll out as they finished last year. Erebus at the front, 888 second, Brad Jones Racing with their 4 cars grouped together there in third, Tickford in fourth, Dick Johnson Racing in fifth, Walkinshaw and Andretti United, and I'll let you guys read the rest because you've heard me ramble on long enough. And of course, it's not just the supercars on track. There are lots of support categories, and again, if you're new to the championship, I would highly suggest don't sleep on these. There's some great variety, some fantastic racing in the support category class. And I'd be interested to know SuperView viewers, those who dial in and watch supercars from outside Australia. I'd love to know if you only get access to supercars content or if you do see the support categories as well. I'd love to know for my own research and so that I can cater to you guys as well who follow this channel. But this weekend, we will have the Dunlop series. This is like the Formula 2 of supercars. It's the junior series in the lead up to the main game, although they're still absolute beasts. They are previous year's supercars. The V8 Super Ute series, big hefty dual cab utes that have V8s plonked in the front of them. A bit of a controversial category, but I've really been enjoying these since they updated the sort of engines in them. Aussie racing cars, little pocket rockets that can have some amazing racing and great slipstreaming fests as well. And then the touring car masters, old school cars that still put on some amazing racing. The support categories do change from round to round, and I'll of course be letting you know what's on track ahead of each event. And speaking of rounds, we have 12 ahead of us. Of course, starting this weekend with the Bathurst 500. Then supercars are off to support the Melbourne Grand Prix Formula 1 on the Albert Park Street Circuit. Then over to New Zealand, the return of supercars to New Zealand this year. Very, very excited to see that. Then they come over here to Perth, up to Darwin, over to Townsville, back down to Sydney, then Tasmania, Sandown, Bathurst once again, of course, for the big race, the 1000, before finishing up with a couple of races on the Gold Coast and Adelaide. And I will be doing round previews and reviews for just about all of these. I am traveling around the time of the Melbourne Grand Prix, the second event on this year's calendar, so I'll see what content I can do for you guys there. But nevertheless, all the other ones, I will be here giving you all the information you need to know. And with that, that will bring this video to a close. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially if you're new to the channel. Do be sure to like and subscribe so you get to see my content throughout this year's championship. And if you are brand new to supercars and have any questions about the championship, please do pop them in the comments below. I'll do my best to help you out and get you into this fantastic sport. Fingers crossed, we've got an exciting year ahead of us. Remember to treat people like your trackside down there in the comments. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next one.